we're here to learn about learning. And we want to learn how to learn more effectively, more efficiently, and then apply that skill of learning how to learn to business and to entrepreneurship and to creating a lot of success. Now, in my own work over the last few years, especially starting a family, being in the most intimate relationship and now relationships that I've ever been in, I've been working on my own practices and developing my own exercises to learn the most, to connect the most with others, to really get the most out of my experiences. And one of the things that I've been doing more of is touching in with myself on a regular basis. Okay, touching in with that part of me that's in the deepest place, and the part of me that really is connected to everything else, all the way back to the Big Bang. So one of the things that we're going to do in this program is we're going to ritually connect in with ourselves. So we're going to do a little meditation for a couple of minutes here. And the purpose of this meditation and the series of meditations is to let go of all that stuff that we were tangled up in, identified with, that was distracting us, that got our mind going, because there's a lot of that now, and to become present in our bodies, in our emotions, in our minds, in our awareness, and to really be here, to just touch in right here and now, and then go into some new information and some new learning. And that, in a way, is a metaphor for what we're doing in this session, okay, in all of these introductory sessions where we learn about learning. In a way, this is a day of disconnecting from that world, from our old reality, and from all of those connections that we have and those roles and identities and beliefs and things. Okay, so we're going to do that for a whole day, and as part of that, we're going to just touch in with ourselves. Okay, so that's the context. All right, so here's what I invite you to do. Take a deep breath with me. And now what I'd like to invite you to do is take a deep breath and do it more slowly and intentionally, deep down into your diaphragm. Okay, so make your tummy fat when you breathe. Good. Okay, gently close your eyes. Keep breathing. Keep your attention on your breath. And now, I'd like you to hold your body in a posture that is poised and relaxed. Okay, just notice the effect that gravity is having. And you might notice that being exactly perpendicular to gravity, kind of balancing your body to where you don't have to lean forward or backward, might be the least energy using way to do that. Excellent. And now as you breathe in, feel your feet, feel your hands, feel the surface of your body. Taste what you taste in your mouth. Smell the air. Listen to the sounds around you. Gently open your eyes. Look out through your right eye. Look out through your left eye. Now look out through both simultaneously. And just imagine everything that was happening in your life just kind of falling off of you, off of your mind, off of your emotions, off of your body. Feel your mood, feel your emotional state. As they sometimes say in NLP, this is the last moment of the way you used to be. All right, let's make some room for a new version of yourself. We're the first species that we know of to move out of our native environment and completely, essentially terraform and build an artificial environment to live in, and then to live in that completely artificial environment removed from nature most of the time. And now as we keep doing that, and we do it physically, in relationships, conceptually, and economically, we move further and further away from the environment that we're adapted to live in. We're further away from it, and therefore, all of our natural wiring and all of our native abilities, in a sense, are less useful. And they start to become counterproductive in a lot of ways. So the task of learning, and particularly in this context where we're learning how to learn and learning how to learn so we can apply that to business, the task of learning is to better adapt to this new environment that's coming. Okay, Darwin was summarized as survival of the fittest. Yeah? And as we move into this increasingly information, technology, artificial environment, the most adaptable are the ones that are the fittest, and the ones that can learn the best, the ones that can learn the most efficiently, effectively, and then to take what they learn and go and use it in their life. Okay, this is not about memorizing things. It's not about reading books. This game is about getting adaptive technology so that we can thrive and we can essentially dominate this ecological niche that we're moving into. And I mean that in the sense not of dominating to oppress other people, but dominating so that we feel a lot of self-esteem, a lot of confidence, and a lot of power. Yeah? And I think that if we don't master these skills, if we don't learn how to learn, and then use that in our life and get it into a feed-forward loop, we're going to find ourselves in more stress, more anxiety, more disconnected from the cutting edge of what's happening, and just feeling less powerful, less like we can make an impact in reality. Whereas if we master these skills of learning, and we do it in a way that's intelligent and aware of other people, aware of the planet, aware of all of the other dynamics that we are enmeshed within, I think that we can accomplish this real feeling of success, of satisfaction. I think we can attract the people that we want to attract into our lives, and I think we can create the sense of control that we want to have, the sense of success and control. Okay, so this is a big deal. It's a really big deal. So who knows what learning is? 2 people. 4 people. All right. I've been studying a lot of learning how to learn lately, and one of the things that they say, kind of some of the experts say, is that learning is relearning. Right? Learning is relearning, and it's going beyond what we know, and it's taking the things we already know and putting them together in new ways. Most of it is not new stuff. Yeah. So, in a way, right, learning isn't what we think it is. Turn to the person next to you and tell them what you think learning is. 30 seconds each. Go. Okay, who thinks they've got it? Who thinks they know what learning is, or they could describe it in 5 to 10 words? Good. Who's feeling brave? Okay, good. If you meet both of those criteria, you need 3 people to come up to this microphone and 3 to come up to this microphone. By the way, we reward 2 things in this program. One of them is getting outside of your comfort zone. Okay, because growth happens when you're not in your comfort zone anymore. And the other thing is speed of implementation. Taking something and implementing it in your life. Okay? So those are the 2 things we reward. So let's reward these more than 3 on each side folks with a little bit of encouragement here for speed of implementation, getting outside their comfort zone.
So my name is Evgeny, I'm from Estonia and Canada, and in my perspective, learning is forming new behaviors, whether internal or external, conscious or unconscious.
Pretty good. Forming new behaviors, internal or external, conscious or unconscious. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mario from Boston, and my way of thinking of it is acquisition of information through the senses, internal, external, organized by the brain, and utilized.
Excellent.
I'm Kurt from Austin, Texas. Essentially, learning for me is trial and error and really understanding and learning from mistakes and moving forward, but always constantly moving forward.
My name is James Essex from Los Angeles, and learning is behavior change.
My name is Keith Decker from Glenwood Springs, Colorado. I would say learning is observation of reality, taking reality, applying it, learning and progressing from reality.
My name is Reen Wang from Vancouver, Canada. I think learning is absorbing new information, connecting and integrating with pre-existing information in your brain and in your body, and use that to cause new behavior change.
Hey, I'm Luke from New York. We're going to do this as a team effort. We thought learning was a connection and synthesis of existing ideas and our sense perceptions. And
I'm Natasha from Canada, and we just met, but we think ours is really good together. So I think that learning begins with unlearning, letting go of past ideas, past beliefs, just letting go and creating that space for starting something new, taking in something new. And then I thought that Luke was a perfect balance to my idea of what learning is.
I'll say it again. So that once you have...
Can I get you right up in front of that microphone?
Sure.
There we go.
Once you have an unbiased perspective, you can then synthesize your existing ideas into new ones.
Awesome. Let's give them all a round of applause. So it seems that most animals can learn. Even in a certain sense, plants can learn. But we can learn exponentially more rapidly and effectively. I think the thing to remember, and I pointed to it a little bit earlier, is that our dramatic ability to learn, it formed in the soup of adaptation, of adapting to changing environments. And we seem to be the life form that has adapted to the most environments. We've now covered the planet, and now we've left the planet, and Elon Musk is planning on retiring on Mars. Right? And he did the first private space launch that docked with the space station, and he's been up in the space station, so he's the kind of guy you might want to listen to, right? So we really adapt to new environments well, and I think it's wise to just connect those two ideas in your mind, learning and adapting successfully to new environments. That's what it's about. That's what it's for. And without the mastery of learning, it's much harder to adapt to new environments. And because the environment that you're going to be in business in 3 to 5 years is going to be very different from the one that you're in now, and your products and your services and your marketing will probably be very different, it's critical to learn how to learn. All right, so we face two types of challenges in life. One of them is called a technical challenge, and one of them is called an adaptive challenge. Okay, so a technical challenge is when you need to know how to do your books in your business. You need to know how to do the accounting. Okay, or you need to know how to put some software on your computer. These are technical in the sense that the information is known. There's a technique for it. You can hire someone to do it. You can hire someone to teach you how to do it. Okay, we know how to do those things. Adaptive challenges are challenges where the solution is not known. We don't know what the solution is. If you're good at learning, which my wife calls us homo imitans, right? So in a lot of ways, we're the ape that imitates very, very well, okay? Better than others, better than all other animals. I consider that to kind of just be regular run-of-the-mill learning, the way that we got it from evolution. When we go to learning how to learn, and then even higher levels, that's when we can face challenges we've never faced before and figure out how to solve them rapidly, figure out how to adapt rapidly. Yeah? And if we keep going again to even much higher levels than this, we become masters of adaptation. One of the things that I'll be recommending to you in this program is that you regularly choose a new diverse area of life, of living as a human being, and go and take it up and become interested in it and learn how to adapt to that new environment, to that new world. Because the lesson that you're learning is not how to adapt to that world, but once you do it a few times, right, you learn how adaptation itself works. You see the higher level patterns. And we'll dive into that in a little bit. Now, a talisman that I bring with me, okay, like a good luck charm, a symbolic good luck charm that I bring with me, is an insight that I had several years ago that really came to me when I was studying the mating game, right, when I was teaching dating and relationships, which is that the next step on the way to success, the next thing that you have to do, especially when you're up against an adaptive challenge where you don't know what the answer is, the next step is not obvious, and it's typically counterintuitive. Right? I call this concept the critical counterintuitive. Who's heard me talk about this idea before? Right, good. Who's never heard me talk about this idea before? Right. And it's useful to remember because our brains, the way our minds work, is we make these leaps in logic, essentially. We try to complete puzzles or pictures that we don't understand. We hate to not know, and we'd rather have an idea that's not correct, but feel secure that we know what it is, than to just not know. And that causes us to jump to conclusions, right? Foregone conclusions that we make, and then those get us into a lot of trouble. Because we'd rather have the security of knowing and being certain in the idea or the belief than to have the success that we want. So when you're up against a challenge that you can't figure out, it's something that pushes back on you, right? Or you trip over it and you realize, oh, wow, I don't know how to do this one. I find it very valuable to stop and remember the critical counterintuitive. That the next step I'm going to need to take is probably not obvious to me, and it's very likely that it's going to be against what I would normally do, because it will appear to violate some other principle that I have. I mentioned in the dating and relationship space 15 years ago or so, when I first said, okay, I'm going to take this thing seriously because I felt kind of like a social loser, and I went out and studied how attraction works and how the whole chemistry dynamic works. And I started observing men who were interacting with women that they were just the kind of guys that could walk up and start talking to a woman and walk away with her phone number in a couple of minutes. And I thought that was like magic. That was like more magic than being able to make $1 million appear in your hand kind of thing. And so I watched carefully what they were doing, and I realized all of a sudden that the map that they had in their mind and what they were actually doing was, in a lot of ways, diametrically opposed to what I believed and what I thought you should do. And, I thought that the game was about being, what I used to call a supersized friend and being super polite and just chasing the girl around and telling her how much you love her and buying her things, car. Like, if she only understood how much I like her, then she would, of course, like me back. It took me a while to realize that feels kind of like a boat anchor to most women. And so now, in a lot of ways, I went too far in the other direction, but I realized that almost if you push the person away, they become more attracted to you. That was a big insight. That was a big insight. And then I saw that pattern just start appearing through my life, through all areas of life and business. And I got that, this wiring that I have, this way that I'm wired as a human, the natural tendencies, the ways that I intuitively respond to other human beings, that's wired for a different time. That's winning a different game in a different existence. And it's wise, and it can be useful in some areas, but in all these other games that we're trying to play in the modern world, it's really counterproductive, and it gets me further into trouble. Right? So the critical counterintuitive. All right, so there are a few barriers to learning that I'd like to just go over with you quickly, because if you don't know the challenges you're facing, it can be very difficult to overcome them. Okay, so two big mistakes in life that we make are underestimating a challenge and overestimating the challenge. If we're going to climb Mount Everest and someone tells you, well, it's a pretty big hill, so dress appropriately, you probably aren't going to make it. You know, and if you're going to climb a pretty big hill and someone tells you that it's Mount Everest, when you show up, you're going to have all this gear and all these Sherpas, and it's going to be overkill, and you're never going to be able to make it up the hill because it's the wrong setup. Okay, so we want to have our expectations set correctly, which in a lot of ways is an important part of learning and learning how to learn. Get our expectations set correctly so we know what we're up against. Okay, I mentioned the first one a little earlier in terms of what we reward, but our comfort zone is one of the biggest obstacles to learning, where we are comfortable, and particularly where we're comfortable in our beliefs and in our mind. Our comfort zone with how we like to think about ourselves, others, the way things work, and the world. And as I've really learned from my good friend and mentor Wyatt Woodsmall, I saw you, Wyatt. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay. Hey, Wyatt. As you get closer to learning an important lesson in your life, you will notice that your spidey sense and your nervousness start coming up. Something feels like an automatic resistance. Right? When you're on the verge of transformation, that's when you're often the most uncomfortable in your life, because you're up against something that can't be solved with the paradigm that you're coming from, and you have to adopt a new belief set, and we become afraid that it's going to screw everything up, that people are going to hate us, that everything's going to fall apart. Okay, so the comfort zone is one of the biggest obstacles, and you'll notice that when you're about to learn the biggest lesson, that's when you're mostly at the edge of your comfort zone. So we want to take it as a positive sign when we're feeling uncomfortable and we're in a learning situation, because that probably means that we have something to learn. Okay, and what you'll see in the program, and I'll maybe call it out once or twice, is if we're dealing with something that's particularly challenging, that's hard to deal with for most people, you'll hear some coughing, or everyone will get nervous and start fidgeting and moving around, or 10 people will stand up and start walking toward the bathroom. It's very interesting how these things work. Okay, and we can feel it in the group, and I'll kind of call it out. Okay, another big obstacle to learning is what you already know. Okay, what you already know. In Ouspensky's book, The Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution, which I mentioned in one of our earlier trainings, it's an important book. I highly recommend it. The Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution. It's a little tiny book. Who read it? Good. Good book, huh? Right? Really good stuff. He says in there, one of the biggest challenges that he essentially has is that you believe that you already know this stuff. So what we already know is a massive obstacle to learning new things. W. Edwards Deming, who's the guy that is credited with really bringing kind of statistical methods to business. He went over to Japan. He was one of the geniuses that really did that. He says that if you measure a person's performance, let's say that someone's learning to swing a golf club, if you measure their performance and you measure it over time, what you'll see is there'll be improvement as they practice, but at some point the improvement stops and they level off. Okay, it becomes a stable system. And once performance becomes stable, it's extremely hard to change, because you have learned the way to do it. Several years ago, Tiger Woods decided to change his golf swing. I'm not a golfer, but the story is fascinating. To go to the next level, he realized that he had to change his swing. But to change his swing, what did that mean? Right? It meant going back. Right? To go 2 steps forward, he had to first take a step back. Right? So he got a coach, worked on changing his swing, and he went way back. And everyone said, "What happened?" Right? He must have lost it. And it took a long time for him to come back, but when he came back much stronger and just blew everyone's mind. So to relearn is actually harder than to learn the first time. It's much harder. And so notice the tendency to say, "I knew that," or to try to see in your life where you've already learned something like that so that you can say, "Oh yeah, that's kind of like this. Oh yeah, I get it. That's this other thing." It's very subtle how it happens. And part of a lot of our security in the world is feeling like we know that. We already got it. We're established. We're oriented to this world. Right? So I knew that, and what you've previously learned is a huge obstacle. And we just want to relax into it. Atisha, a great Buddhist teacher, said, "The greatest meditation is a mind that lets go." And that doesn't clamp down and hold on, but a mind that lets go. So as the information's coming in, right, put your attention on seeing how it's new, how it's not something that you've learned before. Another major obstacle to learning is disagreement. A disagreement. Now, not everything that I'm going to teach, or that my kind of guest teachers are going to teach, not everything is perfectly useful for you. Not everything is appropriate. Definitely not everything that we're going to teach you is 100% true or right or perfect. Part of what we're all doing here is trying to adapt to a new business environment that's coming. And there are a lot of unknowns there. So we're making a lot of best guesses, and we're sharing, "Hey, here's what I figured out over here that's working for me. Maybe you can try that in your world." And if we exchange enough of those, we can all adapt together. We can do a lot better by exchanging the information. So the disagreement frame, and the part that I want to invite you to look at, is it's almost what I would call the scientific paradigm. If you listen to 5 scientists sitting around a table having a conversation, what you'll often hear is one scientist talking and then another one interrupting with, "I disagree," or "No, that's not correct," with this continual correcting each other model. And there's a beauty to that, and there's a real use to it, because when you don't accept lazy thinking, and you really make sure that all your thinking is clear and solid and on a solid foundation, you can go far. But one of the costs is being open to new things that you wouldn't have considered before, new paradigms, new ways of looking at things. And I'm one of these scientific type people, by the way. In NLP, if it's too deeply wired, it can be something that they sometimes call being a mismatcher, where you're constantly looking for how everything that people are saying is not true. And someone says, "Wow, look at the sky, it's so blue." And you go, "It's not really blue, it's kind of turquoise." You know? And it's like you ruin the poetry to, "No, it's aquamarine." You know? Anyone else like me? You always find yourself seeing the other way of looking at things, and I've become very subtle at it now. I try to make it useful and valuable, but it's a little bit of an affliction. You know? So just notice the "I disagree" thing if it's happening, and if you notice it, just say, "How could this information be useful? Is there 5% of what is being communicated here that I could take and use?" As Ken Wilber says, no one can be wrong all the time. Not even your spouse. That's my addition. But no one can be wrong all the time. Okay? Everyone's right at least part of the time, And where they're right, or where what they have to say more technically is more valuable, take that, hunt for it, and sort for it. Okay, find the gold in the communication. Another huge obstacle to learning is fear. Okay, fear. And depending on what map or model of emotions you use, we probably started out with something like terror. If you see a reptile, like if you see a little lizard on the sidewalk and you come walking up and they just take off, that's probably the origin, in a way, of fear. It's just something that rockets through your body and, fight or flight, here it comes. Well, we have much more subtle evolutions of fear, and it turns into things like anxiety, right, and angst. And if we feel it too much and for too long, it gets settled in as a habit. It can become a feedback loop of body, emotions, and mind. But fear, however it shows up, it causes us to tense. It causes us to lock down, to go into the older brain centers. It turns off our abstract visionary thinking. When we're in fear, all that stuff shuts down. Or more specifically, it gets commandeered for avoiding the problem, getting away from the danger. And what we'll do here is we'll do more meditations, we'll do more exercises. We'll try to come into the present moment and relax ourselves, relax our bodies and our emotions. If you find yourself in fear, feeling tension, feeling anxiety, you'll want to pull over to the side of the road, do what you need to do to regulate your own emotional and nervous system to get yourself back to a poised state. Because something that you learn when you're in fear, again, it's going to be learned with an older version of yourself, and it's going to be encoded with the emotion of fear, and you don't want to have those things locked together. Something that's important to learn connected with fear, not in the games that we're trying to play. Another huge obstacle to learning is when the incentives in your life are not aligned so that you learn. Okay, so for example, let's say that you have a family, and in the family there's an alcoholic. And the person has been an alcoholic for 20 years. And the family has adapted to that. The whole family system has adapted. And then one day the alcoholic wakes up, has an epiphany, drives off the road and almost gets killed and realizes life is short. I need to get this alcohol thing handled. It's time. And they come home and they say, I'm going to stop drinking. And then they actually try to stop. Oftentimes what they discover is the whole family system is set up to keep them drinking, right? To make it easy for them to drink. And a lot of it isn't obvious. It's not like the family's buying them the alcohol, but what the family is doing is displacing anger and aggression and disapproval. And they're using the alcoholism as a place to channel all of their own frustration with themselves and with their life, or toward that person, or to be passive-aggressive, or all of these games have now been happening. And when the person tries to stop drinking, everyone else starts getting upset and being more volatile. And it, of course, stresses them out, so what do they need to do? Have a drink. Man, you guys are stressing me out. I need a drink to calm down. And, the cycle happens. That's a simplified version of these things. But that's a place where the incentives are misaligned in life. As I've heard the saying, you always win the game you're playing. We set up our lives, our physical environments, our emotional environments, our relationships, our beliefs, the whole spectrum of our ecological niche. We set it up over time to accommodate the way we want things to be. And all the incentives get aligned around the life that we're most comfortable living. And when that happens, it's extremely hard to change. The biggest obstacle to your change is a kind of an expanded version of this, and this is the last one. It's your social influences, your social environment. Right, so I mentioned the incentives. We really rely on love, approval, affection on affirmation from the people around us that we care about. Okay, it's an important food for us to have in our lives. And if we don't get some of that, we wither and we become very unhealthy. And in order to get and keep that approval, in order to get and keep that positive affirmation from the people that we care about, we will sacrifice ourselves and will sacrifice what's important to us. I, like a lot of people who started off in business without experience, came from a background that was very poor and that really had no paradigm and no real connections to a paradigm of financial success or material security and wealth. And what often happens in those environments is the successful become demonized. All the frustration gets projected onto successful people. Now, it turns out that as people become more successful and wealthy, a lot of them, unfortunately, in some cases, a majority of them, actually do become evil bastards in some ways. So, there's some truth to it. But even so, when you're in that position, okay, where you don't have any of that experience, and then the community, the family, the community, the whole social kind of culture is making that the bad, wrong thing, it's really hard to take a step up and go become part of that thing. Who's run into this in your life, and you know what I'm talking about? You know this dynamic I'm speaking of, yeah. So one of the real values of coming here is that you get to immerse yourself in a new community. This is a new community of people that we have never been all in the same room before. Who's been to one of my programs, one of my live programs before? Okay, good. Who's never been to one of our live programs before? Okay, so new community, all new folks. We're going to lay down new ways of thinking, new belief systems, new relationships, and this group is going to keep us, like it's going to be the rocket fuel that's going to help us get escape velocity. But when we go back to our lives, we're going to go back to a social structure and a set of incentives that wants to keep us who we were, because it's really invested in us being who we were. It's got everything riding on that. Yeah, so just noticing that is very helpful because you can face it with a more equanimous, relaxed kind of stance. Rather than resisting it or making the other person or the group wrong for what they're doing, we can relax and realize, that's what they need to do. That's how that works for them, and I can accept them and love them and keep doing what I'm doing. Right? So notice in your life, you're going to go back to your room, you're going to call someone up that's at home, and you're going to say, I learned this really interesting thing, and you're going to start sharing it, and you're going to hear them bristle a little and not like it. You're going to say, well, I'm teaching you this amazing, I'm just summarized the best thing from this thing. I spent all this money and time, and you're getting upset. And what they are feeling is they're feeling the status quo of their life being threatened. Okay, they're smelling you start to change, and they don't like it because, as Wyatt likes to say, the ways that they use to manipulate you stop working. Yeah? So one of the gifts that we get at birth is what the cognitive scientists are calling cognitive biases. And it's the most unfortunate term. It's just not a couple of words that you feel inspired to take with you and use. Who knows what a cognitive bias is? Who doesn't know what I'm talking about at all here? Okay, good. So these are really just coming onto the scene and becoming mainstream. And what they are, what it is, it's a fancy term for the way we're wired and the preferences that it gives us. So, for example, we have a cognitive bias to avoid things that we fear about twice as much as desiring and going after the things that we want. Okay, so we play the game of avoid failure and rejection and loss of control twice as much as we play the game of success and achievement and getting approval. Yeah? So we move away from the things we don't want about twice as much as we move toward the things that we want. That's a cognitive bias. It's a fascinating area of study. We will go deeper into cognitive biases later in this program. What I found helps remedy the cognitive bias, or actually tune the bias, get us back to a place where we can be effective, is what we'll call mindsets. Okay, mindsets. And a mindset is something you put in that helps adjust you, and kind of if you're leaning like this, it kind of helps balance you out emotionally, cognitively, behaviorally. Yeah, so they set a little bit of a context or some frames that help you become more efficient. All right, so the first mindset is my role as a leader of a growing entrepreneurial business is Chief Learning Officer. All right, so your role as the leader of a growing entrepreneurial business, it's the Chief Learning Officer. Learn and help others learn. Learn and adapt. The second mindset is the more I learn, the more I can learn. The more I learn, the more I can learn. Some games in life are zero-sum. Okay, so if you have $100 or 100 euros or 100 of whatever your currency is in your pocket, and you go out and you start spending it, if you spend 50 of them, that's it. They're gone. Okay? Some games in life are not zero-sum. Okay, they're actually synergistic, or they multiply each other. And the area of learning and knowledge is one of those. So if I give you some knowledge that I don't have half as much knowledge. I still have all my knowledge, and in fact, I just got to practice teaching. And so some games of life are actually abundance games. And this is one of them. And the more I learn, the more I can learn. And even more importantly than the more you learn, the more you can learn, because it's not like you have a tank in your mind that gets halfway full and then you can't learn anything else. Right? There's this new phenomenon that's been going on for a long time, but we've just recently started talking about it, called neuroplasticity, where we can grow new brain cells and new connections in brain cells. And the more we learn, the more that happens. But even more importantly than the more we learn, the more we can learn, the more we learn, the more we can learn at higher levels. We can actually move into a different dimension of learning. Yeah? So learning is an abundance game, and the more we learn, the more we can learn. Learning more efficiently and effectively at higher and higher levels is fundamental to my long-term business and financial success. It is the only long one, so I'll read it a couple of times. Learning more effectively and effectively, at higher and higher levels is fundamental to my long-term business and financial success. So over here you have long-term business and financial success, growing, stable. And over here, you've got learning, and they're connected. Learning, it's a fundamental to that, especially in the world we're moving into, especially. And then I mentioned that we reward two things in this program. Right? One, getting outside your comfort zone, and the other is speed of implementation. A guy that I used to basically work with, in a sense, a company that I used to work with. Hey, Dean, I got to get your help on this. Remember when Mike used to talk about the study that they did where they figured out speed of implementation? I have looked for that everywhere. I think he may have made it up, but it's so good that I teach it anyway. So you know where it is? All right. Anyway, this guy Mike Hardwick that I used to work with, was a super brilliant, awesome, successful business guy. He used to reference this study that they did where they were studying high-performance people and trying to figure out what they all had in common, and they couldn't find common traits, and then they found one, and it was speed of implementation. In other words, when they got a new idea or a new kind of piece of action technology, they went and they did it right now. They took it from the conceptual world and they put it into action. They tried it out. They were inquisitive. They went and they pushed the button to see what it did. They tried it in the world to get the feedback. And when you do this, you really heighten what they call experiential learning. You actually see how it works. Most of us have, unfortunately, a lot of learned helplessness, right? What Martin Seligman called learned helplessness. So we don't go and implement. We want to wait and see what everyone else does. You know, we kind of don't want to be the first one to pull into the intersection. We want to let some other idiot do that, so in case somebody's coming, let them get hit. So speed of implementation, very important, because then you will get the feedback. Okay, so those are the mindsets that will help us kind of adjust for bias in a way that will, really supercharge. Which one of the mindsets is going to be most valuable to you? Which one do you think will be most valuable to you? Turn to the person next to you, or maybe try to find someone right behind you, around you, that wasn't the same. You may have to do groups of 3. Okay, just share. It takes 30 seconds total. Which one's going to be the most important mindset? Okay, come back. I have a question. Is anyone in the room wearing a ring that has a brilliant cut diamond in it that's nice and sparkly? Oh, awesome. It's brilliant? Is it round? Can I borrow it? You are perfect. And I mean that in every way, Andre. What? I'm going to keep it. This is perfect. I promise. You've never let anyone hold it? Is it okay that it's making a debut on stage, guys?
Of course, John designed that ring. So.
Oh, awesome. All right, good. So, who can see the sparklies from where you are? Right? You seeing the sparklies? So, you're not seeing any over there, huh? How's that? Okay, good. So you've got to get right in front of it to see the sparkles. Yeah? So brilliant cut diamond, it's round. It has 58 facets on it. I did a little jewelry stint earlier in a past life. 58 facets, or 57 if you don't put the little cutlet on the bottom. And they're triangles, they're trapezoids, and then there's a octagon on the front of it. And it's optimized for flash. So you can be in a room this big with soft lights, and you can actually see that thing sparkling from, it'll knock your eye out all the way across the room. The way that the facets are cut into the diamond and the way the light bounces around inside is what produces the fire and what produces the brilliance of the diamond. It doesn't have one facet. If it had just one cut on it, if I had a rough diamond up here with one cut on it and I tried to flash it at you, you would not see any fire. It just wouldn't happen. It's the perfect arrangement. It's the intentionality that goes into the polishing of the diamond. Most of us, when we're learning, what we're looking for is the one right definition. I want to know what that means. What does that word mean? Or what does what you're saying mean? And we tend to be oriented around single meanings for words. And what I found, and I've noticed other brilliant people, just called myself brilliant. I'm just going to enjoy that for a minute. And what I found is that people that are really brilliant teachers, what they're doing is they're giving multiple definitions. Okay, multiple definitions. My experience is that a minimum of 3 definitions, minimum of 3, on any important concept, it opens the mind and it creates a new potential for what you can do with the concept. A minimum of 3. When you go to 5 to 7, that's even better. And the way I think of it is, when you find an important concept or an important idea or area of study, an important word, you want to start faceting it by adding definitions. And the more high-quality, precise definitions you can add to the term, the more it becomes like a brilliant cut diamond. But in this case, instead of light shining in and out of it, thoughts shine in and out of it. And it actually makes your thinking brilliant. You have brilliant ideas, the more refined and polished your definitions are. And you'll find that when you go looking for them, you can find multiple definitions, and they complement each other just like the facets on the diamond. And they're different shapes, right? But you fit them all together, and over time, you can really change the quality of your thought. Now, the way I think of it is that what you might call primal human energy bubbles up through our minds, and then it goes through all the filtered layers of our ancient wiring, and then our belief layers and our experience layers. And then that energy shining through there in our conscious mind, like a projection screen, it produces what we're thinking. And let's face it, most of the thoughts we have in our mind are essentially just automatic. They just show up there. They're the same that we had yesterday and the same the day before, maybe in a little different order. Well, what produces them? Yeah? So it's our ideas, it's our beliefs, it's our definitions. And if you work on polishing those definitions and setting them correctly, as the light shines up through them, what comes out the top is much more interesting, much more brilliant. So I just put down a few examples here. All right, so a human. Right? What is a human? Here are a few simple definitions just to give a little perspective. One is a human is the species that we're part of. Okay, it's the label for our species. That's a human. Another is a human is an individual of our species. Right? An individual person. That's a human. Another definition of a human is the emergent property of all of our cells, our tissues, our organs, all working together as one thing. Billions of things on multiple levels of emergence working as one thing. Those are three definitions of human. Marketing. Here are three definitions of marketing. Right? One definition is that it's advertising. Another definition is that it's attracting customers. Okay, marketing is getting customers. Another definition of marketing is it's a powerful business practice that's part of a growing business. Okay, different definitions of the same thing, somehow all relevant, not the same, but all valuable. And if you practiced all of them, you'd do better with your marketing than if you didn't. Three definitions of business. Business is kind of the discipline or economic area of activity. Right? So business itself, just kind of considering the thing that we label as business, almost the economic level, economics. Another is a business is an entity that sells a product or service. Okay? Another definition of business is running it like a business, is taking it seriously and organizing it, okay? And measuring everything that happens inside of it. Okay? These are three definitions of business. I did a study a few years ago. I went looking for what wisdom means, because a lot of people use the word, but I really didn't hear anyone explaining like what actually is wisdom. And when I started looking at the definitions, I thought the definitions don't really sound like what people are talking about. And so I made my own list, and I've done my own research, and I just took 5 that I have of maybe 20 of wisdom. Here's one definition of wisdom. This one comes from my mentor, Jerry, who's no longer alive. Knowing when to take right action. Wisdom is knowing when to take right action. Another definition. what you achieve when you experience something complex for so long that its simple, higher nature becomes obvious. Okay? When you experience something that's complex for so long that it becomes simple and you understand it. Another definition of wisdom. Seeing the widest, longest term perspective and taking action in the now to optimize for that. Okay, seeing the widest, deepest, long-term perspective, seeing the biggest picture, and then taking action in this moment to optimize for that. Okay, imagining how you want to feel, the health you want to have in 25 years, and taking this bite of food to optimize for that. Here's a fun definition of wisdom. Not believing anything too much. Tony Robbins talks about this in one of his books when he was learning from John Grinder, one of the guys that started NLP. He said, Tony, never believe anything too much because there'll always be a situation where it's not true. And when you believe something too much and you're in a situation where it's not true, that's when you really get screwed up. Here's another definition of wisdom. Knowing that most things won't go exactly the way you want and being grateful for it all anyway. Well, multiple definitions. Okay, so you have a lot of definitions in your own mind, and what I'd like you to do right now is do this practice. And we're looking, in this case, for short definitions because we want to practice finding them, not writing them out and perfecting them. Okay, this is about generating. So the definitions I'd like you to write down are 3 to 5 words. 3 to 5. Maybe 6 or 7 on 1 or 2 of them. And what I'd like you to do is come up with 3 definitions for an entrepreneur. Okay, 3 definitions for an entrepreneur, 3 to 5 words each, maybe 7. Go. Good. 3 definitions of success. Okay, 3 to 5 words each. 3 definitions of success. Three definitions of love. Three to 5 words. Okay, find someone that you don't know. You find someone you don't know. Choose the term that you feel like you really got 3 definitions of. It's your favorite 3 definitions that you could share. And exchange. So you're sharing the 3 definitions for 1 term. Okay, again, this is something that should just take a couple of minutes each to do. Okay, find someone you don't know. Share your 3 definitions of 1 term. Go. My good friend Dave Logan, who's going to be here later in the program, he introduced me to Kenneth Burke, who has this idea called a terministic screen. And a terministic screen is the screen of terms or words that's linked together as a network in the mind that we kind of look through. It's a screen that we see and perceive reality through. Once the mind becomes languaged, okay, or coded with all of these symbolic stand-ins for action and things and relationships, we kind of can't go back. We're now a languaged animal that has a terministic screen that we look at reality through. And a part of definition is connecting our ideas and our definitions to others. The way I think of it is if you could blow your mind up in the way it works and you could represent it visually, maybe to the size of this room, what you'd have is this dense network that would look like neurons, but they would be words. And they'd be terms that were reached out, branched, and connected to others in a big network. And learning, in a lot of ways, is making more of those connections to other places. And in our deterministic screen, when we can add definitions, what we're doing is we're adding connections. And we're making our mind network a lot more effective. One of the next steps to take is, once we've done multiple definitions, we want to connect these brilliant cut ideas that we've more carefully refined our understanding of to each other. Okay? So, what are 3 definitions of entrepreneur plus success? Successful entrepreneur. What are 3 definitions of a successful entrepreneur? Again, 3 to 5 words. What are 3 definitions of successful love? What does it mean to love successfully? What does successful love look like? What are 3 definitions of successful love? The more refined your definitions, and the more definitions you have that are polished, the more brilliant your thought, more brilliant the thinking that will arise in your mind. It's worth it to continually refine the definitions that you have and add definitions around important areas of your life, of business, of success. The final thought here for this session is something that I call the transcendent intention. The transcendent intention. As I heard someone say, I plan on living the rest of my life in the future. And in the future, things are going to be a little different than they are right now. I'm going to be different. Now, there's a paradox because I want to be here now for my life. I don't want to just always be imagining what things are going to be like. But I know that I'm going somewhere. And I know I'm progressing in my business, in my career, in my relationships, in my family. And so I don't just want to be learning and creating definitions around things that are important now. I want to be learning and creating definitions around things that will be important building blocks of the next thing that I will do in the future, and then the next thing after that. Okay, so a great pool player or a billiards player or a great chess player, they're not making the next move to kind of win the next move. They're making the next move to set up the next move and the next one and the one after that so that they can then make the winning move. They're thinking 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 moves ahead. And they're doing all of those calculations. And if you learn something and you master something now that's valuable now, but that won't be valuable in the future, you get into a cul-de-sac. Unfortunately, a lot of our young people are doing that in college right now. They're learning things that are valuable to them right now to get a good grade, but they won't be valuable when they get out into the real world. And this leads to something like 85% of graduates don't work in their field, and that's just the ones that graduate. For me, when I was younger, my father was a guitar player, and I learned to play the guitar from him. And I went on and thought, wow, guitar is cool, it was fun, and you know, I can have long hair and be in a rock band and girls will like me. And I had the long hair and I was in the rock band, but the rest of it didn't work out exactly the way I was hoping that it would. But more importantly, I really spent a lot of time learning and practicing the guitar and recording and went on tour with the band and so forth. But now later in life, as I'm still very interested in music, the guitar is not an instrument that translates as well into the reality that's coming. If I had it to do all over again, I would have learned how to play the keyboard. Because where music is going now, the keyboard in a lot of ways is the machine that you can use to access all of that stuff. Another one that I wish I would have focused on or learned is percussion. Because again, the movements are all the same, but all of the gear is changing. It's a lot harder to do electronic or more abstract music with a guitar because of the nature of the way that it, that it works. And in fact, I'm imagining, our daughter seems to really like music. Every day we play music for her and we sing and we dance, and she really seems to enjoy it, even though she's a few months old. And I'm hopeful that she'll pick up music and she'll really want to do it. And so I want to expose her to different music. And my guidance, of course I want to follow where she wants to go, but my guidance is to see if she likes the keyboard, if she likes rhythm and also singing, because these are things that I think will translate. They'll keep going up the stack in a lot of ways into the future, and they'll be useful then. In business, I got a little smarter, and I realized, okay, there are areas of business that are the main building blocks, and if you know what they are, you can take those with you, and you can keep going, and you can essentially use them forever. And some of these areas are what we're going to be learning about in Accelerate. They're the kind of the foundational issues. Then there are things like how to create a great product, how to interact with customers, how to sell, how to market, how to put systems in place, how to manage a team, how to hire great people. These things keep working, not only when you have a little business, but as you grow and you have a bigger business. And then when you move into the next phase of your career, I'm moving into the next phase of my career, helping other people do it. And what I find now is you'll be meeting the people who I've actually invested in their companies and advised them and so forth in this program. When I go into their office, which I show up once in a while, or if we do a strategic meeting and we're working together, oftentimes the advice that they need is about some little granular thing from over here. It isn't some huge strategic, like big, important thing. I went into the office maybe a month and a half ago or something of a company that I've done some work with now for about a year and a half. And what they needed was for me to sit down with their new copywriter guy, young guy, and help him write some copy for this little thing that they were working on. And is copywriting my highest and best use? Not all the time, but in that moment it was. And so there are universal skills that you can learn to set yourself up to win in the future, in the long term. And so I call it the transcendent intention, because the intention is to transcend what you know and what you do and who you are. And as I've learned from Ken Wilber, to transcend, to go beyond, does not mean to abandon or to leave or to dissociate from. To transcend means to include. Okay, to take that with you. For example, something that I have transcended is the audiovisual in a live program like this. I actually got my start roughly in this industry doing the audiovisual for programs like this. Setting up the equipment, doing the music. I am super annoying to these guys because I used to do that. So I'm always, literally Joe walked up here and I was like, is that light set up? And I'm always like, Jared, is the here? No, I want to put the mic over here. I make their life hard because I've got my own ideas about how to do things. I'm learning to let go, and they actually are way better than me at all these things. But the point is that a lot of the way that this program is came from me transcending something that I used to do. Right? But I brought it with me. I didn't leave it behind. So choose things to learn that will be good in the next iteration of you, and then the one after that, and the one after that. Underwater basket weaving is awesome. I've never done it, but I hear that it's fantastic. And it's a great thing to learn. Anyone here basket weaver? Don't mean to offend you. Got one, two, got two basket weavers, three. All right. Ooh, I don't want to get crucified by the basket weavers here. And I'm sure there are some parts of basket weaving that are valuable as metaphors and things in other areas. But if you master underwater basket weaving, it's probably not going to be the skill that you need, in the boardroom or in the next evolution of your career. So when learning things, what we want to do is take into account where we're going and where we're going to be down the road, and learn things that will go from being the thing to being the cornerstone with other cornerstones in the next thing. And then that thing will be the cornerstone of the next thing. And if you approach your life a little more strategically, like this, you'll wake up in a future where you have adapted better and where you can thrive more and where you'll win the game more. Right? So I call that the transcendent intention. And that's one of the reasons why we visualize where we're going often, so we can check back and say, this thing that I'm learning to solve the problem that I have right now, if I solve the problem that I have right now, is that going to solve the problem that I'm going to have in the future? Because if not, I'm probably working on the wrong thing, and even though I may have to take a step backward right now, it might take longer to learn the thing that I really need to learn, or the thing that's going to get me to that level, it's worth it to do. You know, there's an old Turkish proverb, no matter how far down the wrong road you've gone, turn back. I'm a quarter Polish, so I think I can make Polak jokes. Is that, yeah? Okay, I'm a quarter legit. But did you hear about the Polak that swam halfway across the lake and got tired, so he swam back? So, I'm a quarter legit. It's okay, right? All right, that's as far as I'll go with any racial slurs here. I used to hang out with a group of guys that were, when I was in my Christian rock band days, and they didn't want to tell any jokes that offended anyone, so they told Hittite jokes. Because there are no more Hittites, and so you can't offend anyone. What am I talking about? What are we doing here? Do we need a break? The point that I'm trying to make here is it's really easy to get wrapped up in what we're doing and get identified with it and go, no, this is really important. I got to learn this, or I got to figure this one out. Or no, I want to do that. Or no, that's what I'm passionate about, so I have to do it. We want to loosen our grip a little bit here and really think about where we're going in the long term of our lives. And if we discipline ourselves to learn things now that will support the long term of what we're trying to do, I think we can wake up in the future and have a lot more success, a lot more power, feel a lot more esteem, a lot more comfort in our own skin.